Okay? I'm going to start with our criticism of the criticizer. There was a fellow who criticized the scientific method. Can you believe that? Criticizing the scientific method. What arguments could he possibly have? Well, here it is. Let me put him on, and I think he was, hi. We have this person, he said that you need to test explanations. Before he said we have to test hypotheses, which are assumptions. And now he's saying his argument is you also need to test explanations. Okay, so here it goes. Give me a second here. Here it goes. This fellow claims that in science, in his version of science, you must test the explanation before it can become scientific.
You have to test these explanations. And if you can't test these explanations, well, then you're not doing science.
Okay, so he says we have to test the explanations. What could he possibly be talking about? I mean, like I said, he talked last time, the previous time, he said, talk about you have to test the hypothesis. A hypothesis is an assumption. So we make an assumption, like you might make an assumption in quantum mechanics saying that light is mediated by particles. Okay, you can make that assumption. How are you going to test that? Okay, you can't test it. And test an explanation. Well, even if you test it, all you're doing is convincing yourself or convincing someone else that your theory is correct. That's what he's talking about. Okay, and here's the rundown. Okay, give me a second here. Okay, test a hypothesis is to test an assumption. We don't test assumptions. We accept them at face value in order to understand the theory, the explanation founded upon those assumptions. Test the explanation. Well, what are you doing? You're just trying to convince someone. Okay, what are you going to do? Run an experiment or what? Okay, what do you want me to do to test the explanation? Yeah, especially on something that is invisible and intangible, such as the mediator of gravity. What are you going to test? You're going to run an experiment to test, my magic wand here. You're going to test what's up here, what's down here. What invisible thing is pulling, what invisible thing is pushing. Intangible and invisible. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to say you're going to test the theory. Theory is one that you listen to, you understand it, so just to comprehend it, that's it. There's no more than that in science. Someone might say, may have an assumption saying God, okay? So the individual introduces God. And then he says, my theory is that God created the universe. Okay? And so he goes on and he says, yeah, God moved his magic wand, said voila, and there was the universe. Great, that's his theory. That's what he believes in. This is how he visualizes the origin of the universe, okay? And so when you look at that, you say, okay, that's his theory, okay? Now you can criticize his assumption, you can criticize his theory, but test it. How are you going to test that God is out there? I mean, what experiment do you propose? It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, to test a theory, as he said, all you're doing is actually focusing on religion, on belief. What you're doing is, persuading, convincing, converting, and recruiting. That's the elements that you're considering when you're talking about testing an explanation. And that's what the prosecutor does with the jury. He tries to convince the jurors, okay, to his side of the case. And it's also what a priest does, What does he do? He talks about whatever, and what is he doing? He's trying to convince the flock. That's it. So yeah, experiment, trial and error, that's technology. We don't do experiments to test either the hypothesis or the theory. You can run whatever experiment you want at home, no problem. Go ahead and run your experiment, do whatever you have to, stand on your head if you need to. But when you come to the conference, we want you to tell us what you learned. Tell us a mechanism that we can use in physics. Okay? And so you say, this is how I think gravity works, or this is how I think electricity works. Great. And you tell your theory, and people might have questions, might attack it, might defend it, whatever. But the issue here is the attacking and defending, the saying it's correct, incorrect, true or false, that's belief. That's got to do with opinions, religion. The theory is just what it is, objectively. You just try to understand it to see what the guy has going through his mind.